Welcome back to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham, right here on Talk TV, with you all the way through until 1 o'clock. Ian Collins will be here, Jeremy Kyle will be here. Of course, we've got an entire panoply of shows coming up this evening as well. Tom Newton-Dunn with the news desk, Piers Morgan from 8 o'clock. We've got the Talk from 9 o'clock. I'm on that a little bit later on in the week, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday to be precise. But what about the big story of yesterday? The Sunday Times splashed with their story, an extraordinary story really when you think about it, about Prince Charles, the heir to the throne, the man who's literally been out in Rwanda waving the flag for Britain because he's about to be probably the man that steps into the fray when the Queen decides that, you know, she can no longer really fulfil all of her duties. What we've got is the heir to the throne being given millions and millions of pounds from a sheikh in Qatar, right, the former Prime Minister, I believe he is, not least in some bags from Fortnum & Mason, and not least in a holdall. 1 million euros alone in a holdall. Somebody was asking me this morning, how big is that? And I was actually thinking, you can actually get €1 million if you've got 500 euro notes. It's not that many little packages of money. We've all seen the, you know, the various shows and movies where they smuggle money around and cash, and you can actually have $1 million probably in an attaché case. But let's talk to Alan Mendoza, Executive Director at the Henry Jackson Society, because charity commission people are now saying they're going to have a look into this to see what is actually going on. But Alan, very good morning to you. It's a very strange way to be doing business, isn't it?
It's utterly bizarre. I mean, the idea that millions of euros are being casted around in cash around London, being handed over personally to the principal of a charity, is just extraordinary to sort of contemplate what's gone on here. And it, you know, obviously raises all kinds of questions about charity governance, about the nature of the donation, about the donor. So much revealed by this story, and it's just incorrect to say that it's an irrelevancy because it happened years ago. We need to, you know, understand exactly how this donation came about. Why was it paid in such an unusual way? Surely he had money, by the way, he could wire in somewhere. It makes no sense, this story at all.
Well, as Ben Habib just said to me, the only reason you would hand over that kind of amount of money in cash is to make sure that it wasn't traced by anybody who wanted to tax it or to ask a question of where it had come from.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre from that perspective. Look, the Sheikh is fairly controversial. He's been named, obviously, in the Panama Papers, the Pandora Papers. We know all about, you know, the influences of that. But it does seem strange that the heir to the throne here, who obviously is heavily involved with numerous of his own charities, would think this was a sensible way to accept money from anyone, let alone someone from a foreign country.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sort of reminded of that session in, I think it was Zurich, wasn't it, when they decided to award the World Cup first to Russia and then to Qatar, and all those Qatari gentlemen jumped up punching the air. And I have to feel now whether or not there were sacks of holdalls full of euros going around there.
Well, there's long been the suggestion this was not a fair process. If you speak to those involved in the various bids to discover exactly what happened, they will give you chapter and verse on what they say happened. And clearly, Qatar was a most unusual choice for a World Cup, as is evidenced by the fact we're holding it in winter rather than summer, because, of course, it's just impossible to hold it at the usual time. And that's not, of course, to mention Qatar's lack of football prowess.
And, well, not only lack of football prowess, but rather unusual kind of, sort of views on lots of other things as well. Not least, you've got the problem of their reaction to gay marriage and to even being gay. It's apparently illegal in Qatar. We're told it's going to be a very diverse and inclusive World Cup, but I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. They've also been responsible for the deaths of dozens and dozens, if not thousands, of migrant workers who have come in to help build the stadiums. You know, and they've also got a massive grip, have they not, into London's property market?
Yes, in fact, the Sheikh was responsible for much of that. He was in charge of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, basically, that bought up large swathes of London in the first decade of this century. So they've got that clear sort of influence there. And you're quite right to point out there are significant human rights concerns around this World Cup, around the country itself, its treatment of migrant workers, how it treats minorities, and of course its frankly dodgy foreign policy views as well, where Qatar has of course backed the Al-Nusra Front, the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria in the past. It's meddled in the Palestinian conflict. This is not a particularly, kind of friendly country, even if we count it, as a somewhat lukewarm ally.
Yes. And I mean, it's the one place, is it not, on the sort of, in the Gulf, which is looked upon rather suspiciously by Saudi Arabia because they see Qatar as a sort of, ally of the Iranians, ally of the people that don't particularly get along with the Saudis. And it's all a bit complex, I know, to cover in 5 minutes. But I mean, they're not they're not even the Middle East's favourite country.
No, not at all. Though it's kind of difficult to work out who is the Middle East's favourite country. But on the note, you're quite right. Qatar has allied itself to some of the worst regimes in the Middle East, and it's attempted in various parts to throw its wealth around through its control of Al Jazeera, of course, which is notable for not criticising Qatar itself, but criticising everyone else in the region, despite there being plenty to criticise in Qatar, and the relationships with Iran, the relationships with Turkey, the relationships with various, terrorist groups. This is not a country who has, as I said, endeared itself to us in recent years or to its neighbours. No. And that's caused diplomatic chaos.
No, I mean, they're in the Shard as well, I think I'm right in saying, amongst other places that they... Because I think
that's correct, yes.
Al Jazeera's office, I think, in London is still in the Shard. So it's a remarkable thing. But does this also point to what we all suspect as well, Alan, that there are, in various shapes and forms, large amounts of money being shipped in and out of London, often in cash, often in suitcases, often from places where they'd rather you didn't ask where it came from?
Well, this has been a constant theme, hasn't it, in recent weeks, as we were discovering, for example, the flow of Russian money into the country, how this has been operating. Now we're seeing the flow of Middle Eastern money, how this can sometimes be operating. There are grave concerns about how London's become, if you like, a soft touch for this kind of activity. Now, we hasten to add that we obviously don't know the provenance of this donation. There is no immediate suggestion that anything's, been done wrong in terms of where the money's come from. In fact, the Prince's charities have said they vetted it and there was nothing wrong with it. So, that's something that'll have to be investigated clearly by the charity regulator.
Well, I mean, I suppose they would say that, wouldn't they?
Well, they would, but I look. Let's put it this way: if you get a million, euro donation in cash, you better be damn sure where it comes from if you're a registered charity in this country, because of course it is a charitable, it's a charity commission thing to look at straight away. So one would assume, I'm going to assume that there is, some validity. They did check the donation out. They were able to work out where it exactly hailed from and why it was being delivered in cash. That'll no doubt come out in this investigation. But it's an unusual thing to have happened, that's for sure. It's not something that's recommended practice for any charity, and it seems particularly odd given the method of transfer from one, if you like, leader to another.
Well, it also makes you wonder a little bit, does it not, about the sort of the virtue signalling that goes on in this country from various groups of people who are quite happy to accept money from a place like Qatar?
Well, yes, quite right. It's obviously, as we've discussed, it's obviously a country where there are grave concerns about aspects of human rights, about its foreign policy, about the true nature of what it's trying to do, and whether those are in, if you like, the UK's best interests. And yet we're seeing, large transfers of money in this way coming in. I think, the time is ripe, frankly, for some kind of law to examine how, anyone receives money from, particularly charities receive money from certain, kind of autocratic places outside of the UK. We need to look at this carefully and work out what is going on in the money trail.
And on the basis that there's no such thing as a free lunch, I imagine there's no such thing as €1 million in a holdall either. I mean, presumably you want something in return for that, don't you?
Well, there are many reasons why people, donate charities. I'm not going to speculate as to what might have been the reason. It might simply have been recognition of doing a good thing. I mean, let's be frank about this. The Prince's charities do some very good work, obviously. And it may simply be a way of going, right, I'm supporting one of your things, and maybe down the line you'll support one of my things. I mean, there's that sort of, inference always, isn't there, in such large donations?
Well, I think that's the trouble, isn't it? Listen, good to talk to you, Alan. Thank you very much indeed. Alan Mendoza, the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society.